Good afternoon or good morning for those on the West Coast. My name is Chase Bonhag. I'm the co-founder and CEO of First Ignite. Very excited to be joined by Andy Rankin from Idaho National Laboratory today to talk about marketing, research, and patents, and getting all the way down into creating a framework for doing these types of marketing work. Um, Today's conversation is 30 minutes where we will learn from Andy, get to know who he is, his role at Idaho National Laboratory in technology marketing, how he got into that role, some examples of successful campaigns, and then as we're trying to do with each of these webinars, the last portion of this will be spent with Andy talking about a framework. So hopefully a framework that you'll be able to take with you in order to run successful campaigns on your own. So that's what we're covering today in the next 30 minutes, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to pass over to Andy to introduce himself and a little bit of his background as well as his role at Idaho National Laboratory. Andy?
Yeah, thanks, Chase. Just starting as a background, so I have an MBA and a bachelor's in marketing. So my background is purely business, so no technical background. So I've been leading the marketing at INL for almost 6 years. So the primary role is to help move federally funded innovations out of the lab and into industry. And we do this by developing marketing strategies, messaging, and outreach that connect these technologies with potential partners or licensees. And this means that I handle everything from technology positioning and messaging to market evaluation and competitive analysis, and all with the goal of making our innovation understandable, compelling, and commercially viable. So that's a bit about what I do at INL. And then moving into how I got into the role. I started at INL right out of college. So and I didn't have a predecessor or any kind of mentor in tech transfer marketing. So the first few years were a series of ups and downs, trying to figure out what worked and what didn't. And during this time, I focused mostly on inbound marketing, so producing content mostly. I started working on an outbound approach about 3-ish years ago, but it wasn't until 2023 when First Ignite, came out there with the software part of their business that the outbound strategy really, became effective. So before that, identifying companies was difficult, and finding the contact information for people at those companies was even harder. So in 2022, when ChatGPT came out, I started working on implementing AI into my workflow. And depending on the technology and the documentation available, before AI, a one pager for technology could take up to 6 hours. Just trying to figure out what they're talking about, especially without a technical background. So after implementing and optimizing, with AI, it now takes me just a few minutes, to get a good draft. Yeah, and then.
Well, that's great background. Thank you, Andy. Much appreciated. And then for our listeners, I think an exciting thing to know about is even that evolution at Idaho National Laboratory, from focusing on taking a lot of time to draft the necessary content and then posting it and kind of waiting for companies to come. Andy has led INL in a really unique direction when it comes to outbound. So for those that don't know, with a major shift in Andy's work to outbound marketing, they have actually managed to triple the number of licensing agreements with industry for 1 year, and then sustained that new level. So they've actually been able to grow and kind of reach this new level of total licensing agreements per year, which is really exciting. So that's why we're talking with Andy today about what's the framework for that? How can more offices kind of take advantage of that? And I think he mentioned a couple of things. One of which is AI has played a major role in that. And I think it allows for more time to do things like outreach when a marketing summary sheet doesn't take a day or two or a week to draft, gives us more time. So as we move into the next topic, Andy, how about a couple examples of some of the successful campaigns that you have run? Can you give a couple examples of successful campaigns for INL?
Yeah, so the first one I thought of was actually a recent one. So earlier this year in January, I did an outbound email campaign targeting battery recyclers, EV manufacturers, and metal refiners. And this was a bundle of different battery recycling technologies that we have. And so I reached out to 72 people. And out of that 72, we had 15 conversations come out of that. So, that's a pretty good conversion rate for, for cold outreach, right? So the, first Ignite software was really important, and I obviously getting contact information, but also with matching, to the correct companies, right? Because that's a huge part of it. That's probably a big reason for that conversion rate. Is that means that we're targeting relevant people, right? And they're actually interested. So from that campaign, it was about a 14% response rate to the emails, and about a similar percentage for the opportunity. And then, I said it was a recent one, so we don't have a signed license or anything yet, but 2 of those opportunities that we talked to are in early negotiations right now. So
that's amazing. I think what I love about what you just said, I think there's a couple things. One is, identifying 72 companies is a volume that some folks aspire to. It's really great. And getting 15 companies to respond is like absolutely incredible. We've been doing marketing a while. It's rare we run into technologies with such interest. I think one of the cool things that you uncover when you market too is you might not have a license on that yet, but with so many technologies in your portfolio, when you run a marketing campaign like that, there's also been times probably, and I think that's one of the questions I was going to ask you, but where you reach out to 72 companies and nobody responds. And I think like in those situations, it helps us identify like which technologies in our portfolio are generating interest. Like if I send 72 emails and 15 say, hey, this is interesting to us, versus 72 companies and absolutely crickets, it can help us even before like a licensing deal come realize like there may be a lot of interest. So that's really exciting. What role or what are some of the key metrics you use to measure success when you're running a marketing campaign? You mentioned like response rates. I love to hear the quantitative approach here. What are some of the ways that you're measuring success of a campaign?
Yeah. So from the marketing perspective, a lot of it is focused on conversion rates and response rates. How many people are interested, based on how many people we reach out to. Obviously the end goal is a license, right? But, including that as part of the metrics that we track for a success of a campaign is tricky, because there's so many other factors that go into whether something is licensed or not, right? There's so much of it that is out of the control of whoever's running the marketing campaign. So that's, not if you don't necessarily get a license, that doesn't mean that, the campaign was a failure, right? And, going back to what you said earlier, the lack of a response is just as helpful as a big response, right? Because that can save you a lot of money in patenting costs. So yeah, we look at the rates, and then for, if we decide to drop a technology, we can track how much money we saved on the patenting costs. We can look at how many other types of agreements there are besides licenses, so development agreements like CRADAs, as well as, NDAs that lead to, even more discussions on a broader scale than just that one particular technology. So yeah, there's a lot to look at there.
That's awesome. Now, and I know you well, so I understand the process, but what role throughout the marketing process is artificial intelligence playing in kind of the activities you're doing?
Yeah, and I'll get into greater detail on the exact processes later, but AI plays a really crucial role in the way that we run things now. So, it's really important for refining the targeting strategy for who we're talking to, by identifying the most likely people that are interested, and looking at optimizing our content so that the emails, and all of that will help increase the response rates to that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And it's cool to know that you were running marketing for INL for 6 years, and then there was like this inflection point where AI became a tool and now has become like a big part of the office. And for those that don't know, I think the success that INL had has actually led to a DOE funded grant for Idaho National Laboratory in collaboration with a handful of other labs to continue to build artificial intelligence tools to help with the outbound efforts of DOE invested technology. So I think that's also really exciting to see the funding agencies and obviously a major partner of INL support and get excited about the role AI can play in marketing these innovations long term. So that's really exciting. From a lessons learned perspective, what is working best when it comes to promoting INL technologies? And I guess let me ask a different question. How are you prioritizing which technologies? And this may be part of your framework, so I apologize if it is, but how are you prioritizing which technologies in your portfolio to go after? And then, yeah, that would be a great question for you.
Yeah, and that, that process has evolved over the years, of course. Right now, every institution is going to have a different size portfolio, right? So INL gets, I believe, between 100 and 150 new disclosures every year. I know that some institutions get way more than that, some get less. So, that is going to play a big factor into how much effort you can expend on a single technology, right? So I do have a couple of AI tools that I've created that help evaluate the licensing potential of the technology, looking at different factors, like the overall, like the prior art, who's working in that area, how many people are working in that area, stuff like that. But yeah, really looking at the technology and defining its unique value and looking at what the competition is for that technology, whether it's a direct competitor that does the same thing, or it's something, or even no action, as a competitor. Maybe it's just not that important to drive the needle. There's a lot of different factors that could look into the competitive landscape there, and that's a really important feature to look at.
Nice. So, as promised, as part of this, we wanted to last month we did a webinar and we really focused on what would be the steps required to create an industry advisory board, and how could you pull that off this year? So I think as we move into the next section of this talk, for those who are interested in running marketing campaigns, like how do we establish a marketing campaign framework that whether you have 100 disclosures a year, not to mention all the patents in your portfolio, or you have 10 or 500, what's a repeatable process for establishing a marketing campaign? And I think our audience would love to hear that from you. So I'll pass it over to kind of hear about, I think you described as a simple, repeatable process for marketing success. So yeah, I'd love to hear more on that.
Yeah. So this is where, I put most of the preparation for this webinar. So I'll just do a brief overview and then we'll go into each step. So I put it into 7 steps. First is understanding the technology, then positioning the technology, and then competitive research, then messaging development, creating the marketing assets, collateral, promotion and outreach, and then feedback and iteration. So those are the 7 steps I put together. Going through each of those, the first one, like I said, is understanding the technology, which of course is going to be the foundation for all of your marketing efforts. So, this can include meeting with the inventor and the licensing / commercialization manager to help you understand the technology, identifying the key differentiators, what makes this technology unique, and then looking at the development stage. And, I don't know if institutions outside of DOE use the TRL framework, but that's a good indicator. Sometimes a lot of companies are less willing to invest a lot in technologies that are not proven yet. So that the development stage is an important process there. But overall, for this this step, what you're going to ask yourself is, what problem does this technology solve, and who needs that solution? And you're going to come out of this with summaries of the technology's purpose, differentiators, and maybe potential challenges that might come up in marketing that technology.
And real quick on step one, you mentioned earlier, I'm similar, double business background, right? And so talk to me about either the role AI has played or how you are overcoming, and I work for the University of Illinois as well. So we're in similar shoes there, but how do you overcome maybe not having the technical scientific background for each technology you're reviewing? How do you handle that process?
Yeah, AI has played a huge role in that. Obviously I did my job and I did it well before AI became, more mainstream, but it took a lot longer, right? And it was harder, and honestly, it probably wasn't as good. The content that I put together probably wasn't as good. But now, using tools like ChatGPT and some of the internal tools we've developed, it allows me to summarize the technology really quickly, and put it into words that other people can understand. And, that allows us to do more. So to do more marketing and do it better. So
Nice.
Yeah, it's played a huge role for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great, and I love to hear. Yeah, it'd be interesting. I know, obviously, I know Jason from your laboratory. I can't imagine a world where INL's marketing would ever go back to non-AI supported. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a big shift. So moving on to step two, walk us through. So now we understand the technology bit. What is step two in your framework?
Yeah, so step two is what's known in the marketing world as positioning. So it's determining where that technology fits in the current market landscape. So, what market category does it fit into? Is it a battery recycling solution? Is it a software as a product? Software as a solution product? Where does it fit in the current market landscape? Looking at the competitive alternatives, what do people currently use, or what would they use instead? Looking at the key unique attributes, what makes it different from those competitors, and then the customer segments, who would use it, who cares about it. And then we kind of use that information and the information from the first step to refine the value proposition to align it with industry needs.
Nice.
So it's this step, it's really important for coming out with a very clear value proposition for what exactly you are marketing and what exactly you are offering the world.
Andy, we talked earlier, we ran a campaign to 72 people, 15 responded. And then we talked about the story that many of us know as well. We reached out to 72 people and 0 respond. Do you ever revisit step two and say, is this technology strong? And did we potentially position, like whether it's a market application or something like that? Do you revisit step two ever?
Yeah, definitely. So step 7 is, feedback and iteration.
Okay.
So looking at doing exactly that, looking at, if it's not working, then why is it not working? And then making tweaks to that. I have done that before, and found more success after we've tweaked it.
Awesome.
Targeting different people. So yeah, that's important.
I think that's one of the challenges with these technologies in general is there's no perfect answer as to who the customer is. Do we believe in the technology? Do we believe in the faculty member? And I think many times, it's actually funny. I was just listening to another podcast that talked about the concept of don't give up. So if you really believe in a technology, maybe there's another way to position it that can have success. So as we move into step 3, walk us through that.
Yeah, so step 3 is going deeper into the competitive and market research. So this is where you would validate the commercial viability. So identifying competing solutions, and how your technology compares to those. Conducting market analysis to determine the total addressable market, and then narrowing that down to the actual serviceable, obtainable market, which is basically, the realistic part of the market that this technology could actually address. Because if you come out with a technology that helps in electric vehicle manufacturing, the size of the electric vehicle market is not what you're not going to make, several trillion dollars, right? So you got to look at what subset of that market is actually addressable by this technology. And then assessing the industry demand, adoption barriers, and regulatory factors.
When you get to step 3, do you sometimes say, you know what, this isn't a technology that we should continue to push forward? Like maybe we'll spend time and effort on marketing another one if the market size isn't there or the regulatory hurdles too heavy. Does that alter like whether you continue down the path here?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you, if you can't find anything, if there's not a significant opportunity there, then a lot of times you're better off focusing your efforts on something else. And for those types of technologies, we'll still post it online, right, on one of the tech listing sites. So, but as far as active efforts, that would not be a priority for those types of technologies.
And move us into step 4.
Yeah, so step 4 is developing the messaging. So turning the insights that you've gathered through all this research and putting that into communication that is compelling. So developing clear, non-technical messaging that resonates with, the industry audience is not just, technical audiences, like researchers and engineers, developers, etc., but also, their business counterparts. And then writing an elevator pitch, a one sentence pitch, and then longer descriptions, based on, for different formats of where you're going to use it. Right. And then making sure that messaging aligns with positioning and the insights that you've found so far. And then this document that you produce in this point serves as basically the foundational material for everything else that you do.
Nice. Yeah, that's really helpful. And then how about step 5?
Yeah, and step 5 is taking that a step further and creating the marketing assets. So making the technology easy to understand and easy to promote. So this is where you would use what you've developed so far to put together fact sheets, maybe success stories, LinkedIn or other, digital content, listing it on your website, other websites. Maybe you want to do some videos, and all of that kind of stuff is what you would do here.
Okay, wonderful. And then step 6.
Yeah, so a lot of step 5 is the inbound stuff, right? A lot of that is going to be focused on bringing people in to talk to you, but step 6 is where you move on to outreach. So promoting it beyond just having it out there, but connecting that technology with the right audience. And this can include LinkedIn campaigns, posts, ads, posting it and running, running ads, and then of course directly reaching out to specific companies. And this is what I've talked about before, is identifying key companies that would be interested, that are working in that area, and then going a step further and making sure that you're reaching out to the right people. And because I've done different methods there, but the method that I have found most effective is reaching out to essentially the end users, to the people that would actually use this technology in that company.
Nice.
And I have found that they're the easiest to get excited about it. And then they get the business people involved, right? Because if you approach the business people first, then you have to prove a business case to them before they'll even talk to you. Not necessarily a blanket approach there, but essentially, you'll have to convince them to talk to you. But approaching those end users will be typically brings quicker results there. And then of course, doing events or conferences. A lot of our researchers present at industry relevant conferences, and yeah, that's the outreach approach.
So what you're saying is you then are often finding for every campaign you run, you're not just going after, it would be way easier if it was just a perfect job title to each company, but based on every single individual technology you're running, you're looking for the end user, which may be a different job title based on that technology within that company. Is that correct?
Yeah, and then obviously that's not always going to be possible, right? If it's a small company, you're probably just going to reach out to the CTO. You don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, depending on the company, it's easier or harder to identify those end users.
All right, and then the next step.
Yeah, and then the last step is feedback and iteration. So refining the strategy based on results. So, like I mentioned earlier, gathering feedback. If a lot of people are saying they're not interested, responding and asking them why. Why isn't this interesting? And then adjusting the messaging or the positioning based on what you can find.
This is all really great, Andy. Thank you so much for this framework. And again, as I've told the chat, Andy's prepared a nice overview. We're going to put some content together to be able to share with everybody, so you have an overview of this framework. I think it's exciting. I think this is a really helpful overview. A few other tips that I think are just important to keep in mind is that last step, which is feedback and kind of reevaluating, is for many of our technologies, there's multiple market applications. And so if it could have been greenhouses and data warehouses and some other type of potential use case for a phase change material type technology, sometimes we have to run this marketing campaign process for each of those to try to identify which is the best market application. So I think one of the challenges right now that tech transfer offices might face is we have a lot of technologies that may have a lot of market applications. And so this framework is really helpful to try to provide structure in terms of how can we be efficient at executing these marketing campaigns. So thank you so much. I'm going to look at the chat really quick. Let's see here. Okay, so from Janet, I like this part of Janet's question especially. So because I know we're short on time, and I apologize for that for everybody, but how do you analyze the appetite of a potential licensee? So once you have a conversation with them, like how are you analyzing and maybe like ranking your pipeline based on like how did this conversation go, or how do you rank your pipeline like after these marketing campaigns as you get things going, or the overall appetite of a company's potential interest in licensing?
Yeah, that is a good question. Obviously over the years, I've learned to pick up on cues, right? On social cues, whether a lot of companies will say they'll won't necessarily give you a lot up front, and then they'll just want to talk about it and then get back to you. And obviously, whether or not they get back to you or not is a good indicator, right? But looking at and assessing, now that you have a specific company, and hopefully in that conversation they've revealed a little bit about what they're working on that would lead them to be interested in it. You can look at how good of a fit each of those companies are based on what you've learned about them from those initial conversations.
And then one other question that I actually have is, are you personalizing, like you identify 72 companies, let's assume you're reaching out to 72 people or more. Are you writing individual emails, or obviously with assuming with AI support, are you drafting individual emails, or are you creating a template that you're able to write one template and kind of send that same message to 72 people?
So I kind of take a hybrid approach there.
Okay.
So I have an email that is personalized for each company. And then I send one email to each company to multiple people at that company. So the personalization I found is really important. So the way that I personalize it is, obviously introducing yourself, but then and why you're reaching out, but then explaining to them why you thought they might be interested. So a lot of that you can, AI of course is really good at doing that kind of reasoning, but looking at their products and determining, we think you'd be interested in this because you're working on this, and explaining that to them. I found that to be an extremely effective approach.
Wonderful. Well, that was great. Andy, thank you so much for joining us today. I wish we had more time, but we're trying to keep these at 30 minutes. So we are going to, Andy and I, we'll connect after this. we're going to produce some content and send it around. Andy's already sent it over, so we'll just make sure it's in a format that works. So you get the framework. I saw someone ask for the template as well. We'll show you kind of, we'll get a template together and make sure that Alexa from our marketing team will send that out in kind of an after action. Next month, I don't have the date for it yet, but please keep an eye out. We will be meeting with Mark Nolan, the Associate Vice President or Vice President of Corporate Relations at Georgia Tech. That conversation is going to be all about what are the various ways a university can partner with a company for monetization right now. So think tech transfer licensing, think industry-funded research, pay-for-fee service on core facilities, which is actually a meeting I have to meet with INL right after this on. Executive education, and he's got a beautiful wheel that describes 7 or 9 different ways that a university can partner with a company right now, and how can we think about every interaction with a company to make sure that even if they don't license our tech, is there another way that we could connect this company within our university to help drive new corporate revenue? So that'll be next month. Date not set yet, but Mark has agreed, so we're really excited and very thankful. But thank you so much, Andy, for your time today. I know everyone was very thankful, and we'll see everybody next month, and hopefully on the road at UIDP, HBCU, if you're going to be there, or Salt Lake City. And thank you, Andy. So we'll talk to everybody soon.
Yep. Thanks.
Cheers.